We're going to demonstrate how to use VisIt's keyframing feature to do a movie such as you see here. So a couple of things to notice in the movie is that the one of the materials here, the red material, fades out part of the way through it. It sort of goes back and forth in time briefly to give you an idea of what the time series looks like. And the view changes in rotation and zooms into this hole. The hole is being created by having changed the red material, which is, I guess, a barrier there, to fully transparent. And it basically smoothly transitions to fully transparent throughout the animation. So there's several things going on here in this animation. The database itself is moving through time. We're changing the view, and we're changing properties of a plot that are being displayed. So the idea is, I did that with VisIt's keyframing feature, and the idea is to demonstrate how to do that. Okay, so we're going to walk through the steps to create that movie using VisIt's keyframing features. So the first thing I'm going to do is open a database here. The database I'm using is one of our test databases called wave.visit. I'm going to use a fill boundary plot for it. I'll just give you an idea of kind of what this looks like by playing it really quickly here. So it starts off with two materials. The third material, green, sort of propagates through it. And in the video, we are able to make this red area go away by making that particular material go transparent over a number of frames. So the first thing we're going to do is bring up the keyframing window. And I'm going to set the total number of keyframes arbitrarily at 100. I'll explain why a little bit later it might make sense to have a fairly large number of keyframes in the keyframing window. And then I'll turn on keyframing enabled there, and I'll hit apply, and watch over what happens over here with respect to the time slider in the GUI window when we hit apply. Okay, so when we created the animation, keyframe animation, we now have two time sliders. We have the keyframe animation time slider and the original database time slider. Now, the keyframe animation time slider has 100 states in it right here, but the input database actually only has 71 time states in it. So that's what this hash mark is representing on this is the time state aspect of the keyframe. This is the 0th time state, and this is the 71st time state and of the original database. So what I want to do is actually take and move this time state all the way out to the 100th keyframe. So now if I play the keyframe animation, you'll see it move like you'd normally expect, but you'll also see some jitteriness in it, because every so often it's going to redisplay the same state, because there's only 71 states of the input database being spread over 100 keyframes. So just so you can see that, you can see it just a little bit jerky at times because it's repeating the same state on a few of them. And if we go back to the just wave.visit and play that, it's much smoother. You don't see that like jitteriness in it. Anyhow. Okay, so let's go back to the keyframe animation now, and note that we can manipulate the keyframe animation with the time slider here. You can also manipulate it here by dragging this triangle. I find this kind of difficult to do, though. You sort of select it, and then you can move it, and when you do, it changes the time slider over here and vice versa. But I just find it easier to work over here with the time slider. So the first part of our movie, if you'll recall, it just sort of animates forward in time and then backwards in time from this view. So the view is going to stay the same for the early part of this animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a view keyframe at at keyframe 0. So if we go over here and do it, watch what happens over here when I do add view keyframe. We now have a hash mark, and this little hash mark represents the view, the currently active view that it got set to. Now I'm going to go 12 steps forward. This is just arbitrary, but I'm going to go 12 steps forward in the keyframe animation here. And notice as I move forward in the keyframe animation, it's also changing the time state of the database because I have the 71st time state out here. It's interpolating between the 0th time state and the 71st time state over all these possible states in the keyframe. So now we're at 12. And what I want to do here is actually, I want to animate forward in time so that this whole sort of sinusoidal hump becomes visible for a little bit by the 12th keyframe animation. So in order to do that, I go back to my database state, and I'm going to set this to be, let's set it to be 30, or sorry, 300. I think it's the 30th time state though. So that when I do that, let's see, add state keyframe. Now let's see, it already did that for me. You see it added a hash mark right here when I change the time state. We now have the state of the database at time 0. So if we go back to keyframe animation here, when we go back to time 0, then our database will actually be at time 0. And when we go out to 12, it'll be at 300. And you'll see it's displaying 300. So that's that new. Now I'm going to go another 12 steps forward on the keyframe animation to 24. And what I want to do here is actually make it go all the way back to 0 in the actual animation. So I go back to my database time slider, and I slide that all the way back to 0, and it pops up a new hash mark for the state here, representing state 0. So if we play this on the keyframe animation, if we actually play this now, going back to keyframe 0, it should go forward in time, then backward in time, and then it'll continue to go forward in time through the remainder of this. So let's see if that happens. So there, and now it goes forward in time. So we don't need to see that part of it. All right, so that's the first part of our movie is doing that sort of forward and backwards. Now the next thing I want to do is start rotating the view. So I'm going to go back to keyframe slot 24 here, keyframe 24. And I want to create a view that's the same view as this one. So the view stays constant for these first 24 keyframes. So I do add view keyframe. Let's see if, okay, so that gave me a new hash mark here at slot 24 for the view keyframe. And since both these views are this same view, that's going to keep the view constant over all these keyframes. Now I'm going to go to animation keyframe 36. That's another 12 ahead. This is just arbitrary that I'm doing this. And I want to start rotating the view. So I want to start a rotation of the view here. So I'll just get it sort of partially through this rotation. And I'll do an add view keyframe. Oh, and I want to zoom. Actually, you know what? I think I'll just rotate it. Well, let me zoom it too. There's 2 steps in zoom, and then I'll do add view keyframe. All right. And then I'm going to go to keyframe 48. Right there. Notice this database is changing in time here. I'm going to fix that in just a minute. But now I want the view to be fully rotated around, pointing at the viewer here, and zoomed in, say, another 3 steps. And we'll do another add view keyframe. So that animation is going to do a slow rotation and slow zoom over those 24 keyframes. Now, I want the time state, however, to remain the same. So what I'm going to do is now go back to the wave.visit active time slider, and let's see, that's interesting. It's showing 0 here, but that's obviously not what it's displaying in the window. So let me, if I jump forward one, okay, it created a view, a new state keyframe right here, and I want it to go back to 0. So now this state free keyframe is 0, this state keyframe is 0. So for this whole part of the animation, it's going to stay in time at time 0. Now, one of the other things I want to do here is I'm going to go back to this keyframe, and I'm going to start animating out this red region by making it go transparent. So I'm going to go back to my keyframe time slider, and I'm going to go back to state 36 there. And what I want to do is, let's see, I want to create a, I want the plot attributes to start changing here. I want the plot attributes to remain the same for this whole time, but then I want them to start changing, animating out the red region. So I need to create a plot attribute state right here, which is basically a copy of this one. So what I'm going to do is click on the plot attributes. I'm going to just change something, anything about the plot, just briefly, and do apply. And now I've got this diamond representing the plot's attributes at this time state changing. Now I don't actually want it to start becoming transparent in this portion of the animation. I want it to start becoming transparent here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to full transparency here, hit apply. So now this, at this point at keyframe 36, the plot attributes are still going to be 100% opaque for the red region. Now I'm going to march forward to keyframe 48. And I'm going to go back to the plot attributes, and I'm going to make it go, oh, let's go down to 25% opacity. So not completely away, but most of the way. We'll apply it, and we now have a new diamond here representing the plot state at that moment. And then finally, what I want to do for the rest of the animation is just have it move forward in time, everything else being the same. And that's what it will do. As it goes beyond the state, we'll hold everything constant, except remember we've got a ending time state of 70 in the database here. It's going to start from wherever it is and start marching forward in time. So let's play this whole keyframe animation and satisfy ourselves that it's going to do what we want it to do. Okay, so this view, so when I went back to keyframe 0, the view should have been reset. So let me just reset this view real quick and do add view keyframe, and that should update this view keyframe right here. And let's see if that's the case. Okay, no, the view, so I'm not getting the view keyframe. So let me just let me go back to state 0 here. I want the view to start changing here, so let's do this. Maybe what I need to be, okay. Do 24 is where I want to start that at, I think, right? Yeah, that's 24. So I want the view to start changing there. So let's do this again. So I'm going to start the rotation and a couple of zooms, and I'm going to say, oh, it's not, oh, I know what I don't have use view keyframes set. Let me click check that and hit apply and go back to 0. Okay, that was the problem. My apologies. I didn't have use view keyframe set. So now let's see if this does what we want it to do. Yeah, okay, now it's doing what we want. Okay, so that animation is doing pretty much what we demonstrated in the original movie. The only difference is I'm not having the opacity go all the way to 0 for the plot attributes here. So now that we've got the whole animation set up with keyframing, we can make a movie. So we'll go back to time state 0, and we'll say save movie. I'm just going to do a new simple movie. Continue. Notice that it's got the numbers that are associated with the currently active time slider, which is the keyframe animation. And it's going to march through these at, I want to reduce this maybe to 5 frames a second, make it a little bit slower. And we'll just call this keyframe demo. Continue. And let's let it march through this, generating all these frames real quick. So in that sequence in the middle there, there's multiple things happening. The time state of the database is changing. Oh, no, it's not actually. The time state of the database is staying at 0, but the plot attributes are changing and the view is changing. Okay, so it's finished producing all the frames. Now it's encoding it into I think an MPEG movie here. It says it's done. So let's just go confirm that we got what we expected. Keyframe demo, let's go ahead and play that. Okay, so that's behaving like we'd expect. Okay, a couple of final comments here. Why 100 keyframes? In theory, I really only have, how many keyframes have I actually created here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In total, there's really only 6 keyframes to basically specify this animation. But here's the problem. With the current interface, each of these white lines represents a real frame in the actual animation. And we should adjust this in the future. The interface could change. We ought to be able to say how many actual movie frames are between each of these keyframes and basically vary that number, or how many seconds or whatever. We can't currently do that. So if you want a smooth movie, you are going to have to choose a rather large number of animation keyframes. You could choose 1,000 and you'd have a whole bunch of, it really doesn't matter, but the larger number, the smoother your animation is going to be. That will be fixed in the future, but that's the way it is right now. One other final comment is you'll notice I didn't do anything with an operator. It would be wonderful to actually animate the behavior of an operator, for example, a slice or a threshold where the threshold value is increasing or whatever. Presently, we do not support keyframing of operators, but when that gets added, if that gets added, that would make this even more powerful interface for producing a movie.